Hello my dear YouTuber friends, and I hope you're all keeping well. Welcome to this new video. This is Back to Basics part 43, I believe. Part 43, is that correct? It's the newbie guide in flying the Spitfire. I've been flying Spitfires in various sims for quite a few years now, from Flight Simulator X to X-Plane to DCS World, and of course in Microsoft Flight Simulator itself. So it's my newbie guide. I'm going to give you hints and tips on flying this wonderful warbird. The reason is we've been doing a round the world series, and on our next leg, all links to them down below in the description. On our next leg, we're going to be flying warbirds like the Spitfire. And a couple of people who haven't flown Spitfires before got a little bit worried by that. And I suggested making a video, and people seem to want me to do so. So this will be it. Flying tips. Tips on taxiing, on taking off, and on landing as well. What I do, I'm actually fairly good at flying this now. And I am flying the Flying Iron version of the Spitfire, as that seems to be the most popular choice for both Xbox and PC pilots. So let's not dilly-dally. Let's get on with this video. There you go, so I'm set up in the Flying Iron Spitfire at El Prat Airport, which is very appropriate for me, isn't it? Next to Barcelona, that came out with City Update 7. I'll link my video I did about that down below as well. So I've got no throttle, just started the engine up. Let's jump inside the aircraft. What I'll do is just increase my throttle to about 20% or so, 20-30%, release the parking brake. That should get the Spitfire moving. There we go, it's moving forward slowly. And what I'll do is just bring my throttle back to about 10% now. Let's show you this outside the aircraft. 10%. I believe in the real things, like the DCS version of the Spitfire. You've got to be very careful on that. You get the aircraft moving on the ground and pull your pull your throttle all the way back, or your wings tend to tip very easily. It's not quite as drastic, at least not with the Flying Iron version. Oh, you see, there you go. So I'm going too fast there. That was a good example. If you're going too fast, if your throttle is up too high and you taxi vigorously, you'll tip your wing off the aircraft like that. With DCS, it's game over at that point. So I'm going to pull my throttle back, make sure it's only like 5 or 10%. Now if I turn sharply, yeah, it's not happening. So if you're taxiing and you're turning sharply, to either pull your throttle back completely or have it at 5 to 10% at the max. You'll still reach your destination. If I want to get to the runway here, for example, let's turn vigorously. See, I can do it with that amount of throttle. And I try and find the taxiway to the runway 6. I think it's runway 6 right down here. I can intercept that runway. There you go. Let's just come down here a little bit so I've got a bit of runway ahead of me. Yeah, I can do it with that 5 to 10% throttle max. I can taxi quite vigorously there. There you go. I'm turning all the way. I'm using my twist action on my Verpal HOTAS set. Just did a complete 360 there, no problem. I can turn quite vigorously. If you're turning a lot, it may actually slow your aircraft down altogether, just be aware of that. There you go, I'm going along. I can increase it slightly there, just to get my aircraft moving a little bit quicker. If you're taxiing in a straight line, you don't have to worry too much about 20-30% throttle, as I'm doing that. Then remember to pull your throttle back to that 5-10% mark. Listen to your engines if you want to taxi onto the runway like this without tipping your wings. So there we go, and I'm braking. Just be careful. If you brake too vigorously, hold your brake button down all the way. You'll notice the nose of the aircraft will want to tip forward. If I didn't release the brake there, I would have banged my propeller on the runway. So there you go, that's some taxiing tips. Now let's take you to some takeoff tips. Now, as we have such a perfect entry to runway 6 left, it is in fact. I got my parking brake on. I'm throttling up. Yeah, no, my parking brake was off. I'm just going to taxi fully onto this runway and show you some takeoff tips. So let's just line up properly with 6 left here at El Prat. So takeoff and handling tips now. Handling in the air. So there we go. Jump inside the aircraft. Pull the throttle back completely. Brake, but not all the way. I don't want to. Just stick on my parking brake because it's something I want to show you there. Now, let's just put ourselves back to our default view. What I do, my tips for takeoff, with my parking brake on, so remember that, parking brake on, you can tell whether your parking brake's off or on in the runway. It's on if it's in this direction to your right. It's off if it's to the left. So I've got it on at the moment. I'm going to increase my physical throttle rather, to about 40% there. So when I release the parking brake, the aircraft will start rumbling. Let me talk you through this before I do it, because it's going to happen quite fast. So let me bring my throttle back just for now. Increase your throttle with your parking brake on to about 40%. Release the parking brake. Increase the throttle to 60% roughly. Push down, once it's increased to 60%, push down on your flight stick. Push up on your flight stick rather. Not down, push up, so you're pushing the nose of the aircraft down onto the runway, because currently, as you can see, I want to get the aircraft off its back wheels so it's in takeoff position. So 40% with parking brake on. When I take the parking brake off and the aircraft moving, increase the throttle to 60% and push forward on your flight stick so that the nose of the aircraft will go down. Be careful not to bang it onto the runway. Once the aircraft nose is down, use tiny rudder adjustments and increase your throttle to about 80-90% and you'll be good then to take off. Let's put that into practice, shall we? So let me try and do this as slowly as I can. So 40% throttle. Take off my parking brake. The aircraft's moving. Slight rudder adjustments if you need to. Increase the throttle to 60%. Push down, push up on my flight stick to get the nose forward. Increase to 90% now. I'm going to go to 90%. Before you know it, this aircraft just wants to get off the ground. You know what? That's enough speed. Up you come, beauty. And at that point, gear up. And there we go. Now, with the gear and flaps up, you can see if your flaps are up. You can see outside if your flaps up. If your flaps are down, it's quite visible in the Spitfire. I've got to watch the nose of the aircraft. It'll start dropping, but you can see there. It's quite visible with flaps down. Gears and flaps up. The handling of the aircraft, something you need to become familiar with in the aircraft. This is your airspeed. Can be difficult to read. I'll show you a tip. This is our vertical speed. This is quite easy. If it's at 0, that hand means I'm not climbing or descending. If it's above, I'm climbing. If it's below, like that, I'm descending. Let's get it back to around 0. And that's my altitude. Little hand is thousands of feet, big hands is hundreds of feet, so I'm just over 1,000 feet altitude at the moment. Just going to trim slightly, let the trim catch up with this aircraft. So I trimmed my nose up, I'm going to trim it back down now as it's climbing quite vigorously. Not got any backwards or forwards pressure on the flight stick. And there we go, I'm just going to trim for level flights here. So don't chase it, I'm just trimming nose down. I'm just waiting for that hand to move down to 0. I did have a bit of backwards pressure there, I didn't realise. Okay, my bad. So let's trim back up. Show you the same procedure for trimming back up. Get that to 0 as best I can. And use tiny throttle adjustments to get yourself there as well. So there we go. And the handling, I like to akin the Spitfire to a penguin. It's clumsy on the ground and keeps falling over. Once it's in the air, it just likes to dance and cut through the air. You should have no trouble maintaining level flight, straight and level flight with the Spitfire. But a couple of tips. I think firstly I should show you my sensitivities. This is going to be to taste. This is on my Virpil set. So what am I doing? I want to go to options and control options. I've got my flight stick. I'll link my video about the Virpil set. It's the finest hull test system I've got currently. But I'm on my Virpil stick. Sensitivities, my ailerons, left and right. I don't want any, I want very little. I've got -1 in both the minus and plus sensitivities. I want very little sensitivities. I want the Spitfire to cut through the air. I've got a slight -9 sensitivities, -9 plus and minus, in the elevator. So you're moving your stick forward and backwards. I've got a bit in the rudder as well, because the rudder was a bit too sensitive. So -12 in the rudder axis, axis Z in the case of my Virpil set. So there you go. It's going to be to taste. I don't think you need that much in the Spitfire. You want it to dance and cut through the air, but watch out for your rudder. Whatever rudder set you're using, you don't want that oversensitive, because you will be crashing the wings or, goodness knows what, tipping your aircraft up on the ground. So there you go. Something else I want to show you. I did say the airspeed is difficult to read there. Give you a tip, and it's something I use when I'm flying the Spitfire, so don't be ashamed of this. Go to your options, go to assistance options, and under assistant options, assistant options, go to user experience. I've showed this in other videos, but instrument heads up display cockpit cam, put this on minimal. Did that happen? Yeah. Cockpit cam, minimal. You've only got 2 options, off or minimum, so you don't get many more options. So minimal, apply and save, go back, resume. Now you can see I've got some readings. I've got a compass reading, which can be quite useful, but I've got the airspeed reading, which I find highly useful. Altitude, it's quite easy to read the altitude in the aeroplane, having the Spitfire at least. But that airspeed, let's slow myself down, just bring my throttle down to about 70%. I'm going to see whether I need to trim to maintain a level flight there. Maybe trim up a little bit, but as you can see, it's so easy. Have fun with the Spitfire. I'm using the Flying Iron Spitfire. This is a preview version. I did a review of this a long time ago when it was first released. I'll put it down in the description. Just be aware that I call it Flying Luron. For some reason, I couldn't read Flying Iron. Doesn't matter. I did a review of that down below. I'm a bit ashamed about that one. On the updated, I can't update it via the marketplace because it's a review version, but I believe a switch here brings up a tablet where you've got autopilot. Ugh, in a Spitfire. I don't like that. Even on group flights, I manually fly this. If you want to know where you're going from A to B, bring up your VFR map. I just did that via Flow. But VFR map, it'll show you where you are along the flight route, as long as you've got a flight route loaded in to Microsoft Flight Sim. Do it that way. Autopilot, I just don't get it in a Spitfire, and I'm kind of against that. But it's up to you. I believe the updated version, there's a switch somewhere, and it'll bring up a tablet where you can do a bit of autopilot in a Spitfire. Okay, so that's takeoff and handling tips. Let me now take you to my landing tips and conclusion. Okay, so landing tips. So El Prat Airport is just ahead of me. What's my airspeed at the moment? I want to bring that down. I'm just lessening my throttle to about 50%, of course, keeping an eye on my vertical speed as well, and trimming as necessary. Bringing that airspeed down. What I do is feather my flaps. So I put my flaps out. You've got to watch the nose of the aircraft will drop. Bring my flaps out. You can see my airspeed at the bottom left there, or even on the airspeed indicator is dropping. I don't keep it in flaps speed, but what I'll do here, take advantage of that and pop out my landing gear. Let's get back in the aircraft so I can see. bring up my flaps again. I don't want to go too slow at the moment. I'm just feathering those flaps just to help slow my aircraft down. Just going to reduce my throttle slightly. Ideally coming in over the runway. Maybe 80 to 90 knots. So I'm aiming towards that. The runway's still ahead of me. There's a few people on live server, which is always nice to see. I do like that. What am I, 150 airspeed? So it's coming down. Once I get nearer to the runway, I will keep it in flap speed. I'm just going to feather. I was actually leading up to 190 airspeed there. So I want to bring that airspeed down. When I put my flaps down, I'm holding my flight stick, but I'm pulling back on my flight stick to keep my nose up. I'm not going to bother with trim at the moment because I'm not keeping it in flap speed. I mean, I suppose effectively here I could keep it in flap speed within this sort of configuration all the way down to the runway here, because we're getting nice and slow on our airspeed. Let's do that. It's probably a more efficient way of getting this aircraft down and maintaining that low speed. As you can see, I'm hovering now about, what, 115 knots? So I'll reduce my throttle again. If you want to alleviate holding your stick back, and I'm not putting too much pressure holding it back, you can just add a little bit of nose up trim there. Let's see, we'll aim for the left. I think it's 24 left from memory at this airport, which is just slightly to our left there. Actually, someone's on that runway, so we'll go 24 right. Sorry, people. The runway's not very visible to me there, but I know it's just ahead. What's my airspeed doing? 110 knots. That's good. Reduce my throttle again. Let's just keep bringing that airspeed down. So I'm just carefully, you know, while you've got some distance out from the airport and you've got the runway in sight, don't do it right on top of the runway. Otherwise, you may have trouble reducing that airspeed in time. Give yourself plenty of time. Bring your airspeed down. It's good to have that readout. Or you can actually look, once you get efficient reading the dials, you can actually look at this and see where you need to be. It's around about there. I need to be with this aircraft. Where is this runway here? For some reason, I always have... Ah, there it is. There it is. Just slightly to my right. Let's pull out my view so I can see my airspeed indicator again. I can see my vertical speed as well. There you go. Bring down my airspeed again, so it's going to go sub 100 knots. Was that miles? Is that miles or knots? There we go. Sub 100. Just be careful. You don't actually want to stall the aircraft. Once we get over the runway, we can bleed off that air even more, just by simply nulling the throttle when we're just a few feet above the runway. There you go. I've just brought my throttle down again, and maybe at this point 20%. I am holding some back pressure on my stick to slow my aircraft. Let's hope I can make this a good landing. There you go, sub. There we go, we're coming down nice now. Be careful, if you reduce it too much, you'll be pretty much landing too early, which I am slightly there. I almost landed on the lights, but never mind. It's giving you a... Nah, we're over the runway, that's fine. I've just that just about right. And there we go. Oh, did I just get a bounce there? Yeah, if you get a bounce in the Spitfire, don't worry, it's typical. I'm going to dab my brakes. Don't hold your brakes down until the aircraft goes on its back wheels. Then you can hold your brakes a little bit longer to brake further. If you hold them down too much, the nose of your aircraft will come down and you'll bend your propeller. Just come off the runway in case anybody wants to land. So there we go. Now I can brake fully. Oh, see what I mean? If you hold it down too much, stick on my parking brake. Hold it down too much, the nose of your aircraft will just crash into the tarmac. And there you go. So that's my hints and tips on flying the Spitfire. And again, this is the Flying Iron version. Not fully updated, but maybe I'll get around to that one day, getting the full version on the Steam version of Microsoft Flight Sim. I do hope this will be helpful to some. Let me know down below. Give this video a like if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe for more. Come and join us on that next Around the World leg. I'll put the details out once I got them myself, and I'll see you soon.